right, my guest today is Mr. Tim Hipp, not only a friend of mine, but also someone who's been an inspirer of this podcast, and been looking forward to having Tim on. He is a 20-year veteran of the fitness industry, owner of two businesses. One is Wellness Solutions, and the other one that we'll be talking mostly about is RXR3 Recovery Lounge. Tim, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Such a joy to be here. Congratulations on the podcast. I've been keeping up with you, so keep hammering. Good job.
Yeah, thanks. As I mentioned, we'll get into the RXR3 Recovery Lounge, and that was kind of one of the key things of you informing me or educating me on some of the different modalities available out there. But before we dig into RX and Wellness Solutions, a little bit about your background, kind of how you got into the fitness industry 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, it was one of those things. I think everybody when they're younger, they fitness in some shape or form, whether it be weightlifting. I think particularly for young males, weightlifting has been something that has pulled some folks into the world, and that was the case for me. I wanted to, I wrestled, so I was a skinny 6-foot frame person. So I needed to put some meat on those bones, and approached a guy that I worked with and started working out with him. And I really think it was at a point in time where my body responded well to weightlifting, and within a matter of 3 to 6 months, had put on 15 pounds of muscle, and kind of the rest was history. But it kind of laid a foundation of discipline that kind of, I think the foundation was certainly in high school sports with wrestling, but just kind of added into it in those early college years when my friends were out doing things that I guess college kids do. I was definitely focused on studying, sleeping, eating, and lifting. That was kind of my core four. But studied exercise science at Appalachian State. Met my wife, who also studied exercise science. And if I think about over the past 30 years, that has really been my tool to kind of propel me in life. Obviously, a strong relationship with Christ is is a solid foundation. But the physical component and just struggling, with weightlifting or any type of physical challenge, it just helps me just kind of push through it. So.
Yeah, I mean, it lays a good foundation. You mentioned the discipline on any aspect of life that you can push through the physical. You can correlate that or overlay that to other aspects of your life.
For sure.
So taking that exercise science, what was kind of the precipitous to do Wellness Solutions? I think that was your first business, right? In fitness industry, and what that is.
Yes. Yeah. When I was in college, I took, it was a winter break. I took I guess, it was a ton of snow in Boone, North Carolina. Was not a lot. I had my own personal training business, plus I was working at the hospital wellness center, but everything was kind of shut down, and called my uncle in North Carolina that was working for a company called Southern Fitness Products, and went down there for about 2 weeks and made sales calls, loaded trucks, fell in love with the kind of the fitness, the exercise equipment business, and took over a territory in my senior year of college, took over a territory, which is this territory, the Mid-Atlantic, Maryland, Virginia, DC, was making sales calls, studying, still personal training. I didn't need a lot of sleep, I guess, when I was in college. So just was doing all of that. And then just kind of that catapulted me into moving up here right when I graduated. Sad story, within probably about a year and a half, the president of that company, Steve Crittenden, died. Had a brain tumor that was cancerous. And so after that, just created Wellness Solutions, That was in 99, 2000. And then from that, just continued, just grew Wellness Solutions as a company that focused on a unique way of training, not just a traditional way of training, but more of a functional training. I think that was, you think of the early 2000s before functional training was a popular term. Just kind of aligned our company with ways that were not traditional. I feel like, if you're going to stand out in your industry, you need to find a sense of unique ability, to be able to, to share that story, to kind of give your customers and then some approach to fitness.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, just forward leaning on things. And like you said, like functional fitness, 20 years ago was not exactly a term. And now it's like one of the key terms and methods and procedures when it comes to fitness, and less silo stacking on sport related. I had other conversations where you're seeing a continuum. There's a baseline understanding, regardless of whether it's football, whether it's soccer, track, or being a ballerina. There's a lot of the physiology is the same. It's just the desired outcome, and then how you adjust those programmings to tweak it.
For sure. I think over the past.
Go ahead. No.
I was going to say, just over the past 50 years, you've seen something from the days of Arthur Jones, where you had circuit training and you were specifically targeting a major muscle. You go through a circuit and then you're done. To where now you're doing through 3 different planes of motion. You're not just in one plane. And then kind of, functional fitness is, has many terms, but where it originated was just like, hey, listen, we may be strong in the gym, but am I strong outside of the gym? I mean, why am I working out? It's not just that mirror test, because as you and I both know, we don't look like we did when we were in our 20s. But how do we want to function when we're 80 or 90 or 100? I mean, I always had this goal in my mind. I want to be 110, because there's a lot to see. There's a lot, you can imagine how many different things, how many different changes you would see in society over a 110-year period. So that's kind of what keeps me driving. But, to train in a functional way, to continue to make those challenges in your workout, in different, just really attacking your weaknesses, not to have stronger weaknesses, but just so the weakness doesn't circumvent what your overall goal for fitness is.
Yeah. And, kind of the basis of this in RXR3 Recovery Lounge is, being able to enable yourselves to be able to recover well, because there's a lot of life to be led. Like you said, there's a lot to see, and you want to do it well and be able to enjoy it, not being stuck on a couch or what have you. So if there's ways to mitigate or hedge or improve, that's kind of where we want to be.
For sure.
So as you spent the time with wellness, you've been in gyms, you're at major universities doing these installs and things of that nature. Where along the lines did you start to see that next, going from functional fitness, seeing that early on, to some of these modalities now that they're starting to get a little bit more mainstream that you have at the Recovery Lounge? Maybe give your perspective on what you were seeing, and then why you felt that the Recovery Lounge was something that could be successful.
For sure. I think as a business owner, you're always thinking of strategy, and sometimes it's not even just an intentional thought. It's just something that's in your brain, kind of how you're wired. And I would say probably around 2007, 2008, when CrossFit was really coming on board, coming online, where you started to see these boxes to show up, and they were going to get horse stall mats and a rig and some bars and plates. For a distributor, or even for a manufacturer for fitness equipment, there's not a lot of margin in the volume. If you look at University of Michigan, I mean, that was $1.5 million worth of strength and conditioning equipment with some cardiovascular equipment. or George Mason University that has probably $250,000 to $300,000 worth just of wood-weight treadmills. Well, you're not seeing that within the CrossFit world. I mean, they're not buying that volume. And, you know, when you're making that type of pivot, you got to say, okay, hey, what's changed in the industry? I mean, you know, you're looking at CrossFit, and if you know, or even read a little bit at CrossFit, it is a red line type mentality. And what I mean by that is they're pushing the limits over sometimes a short period of time, but you're very high intensity, and you're continuing to do it. And so you're continuing to break down the body with the goal for the body to adapt. Well, how do we adapt? I mean, you're 20 and 30 would be easy, but when you're 40 and 50, not so easy. So making the shift to where, okay, people do want to train harder. I do commend, you know, CrossFit. I do feel like they do train smart. But we have to, as we get older, you know, if you have a 30-year-old doing your programming and you're 50, his lens is way different than your lens at 50. So having the recovery modalities come in to be able to allow people to train at that level, I just felt like that was going to be key. So kind of what we saw is there's going to be a section of the space that we're outfitting that needed to lend itself to an area to where someone could recover. Someone could say, hey, listen, I tell owners, when you have your clients leaving your space, you want them to feel good and look forward to coming back, not feel horrible and ask themselves, why am I doing this?
Right.
So that was it just made sense to be, you know, having people leave the facility feeling well, feeling good and ready to come back, and even to go about their day. I mean, fitness is a small part of our day. We have our families, we have our work, we have our communities. It's not sustainable to say I'm going to go out there and, you know, kill myself at 6 a.m. in the morning and then not really be able to pick my head off the desk until 1 or 2.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We're not as young as we once were. But also, you know, most of us, it's only the 1% that do this professionally. Right. So oftentimes it seems like we look towards the professionals. I'm not saying that it's just out of context to where most of us are as it relates to fitness and doing that. And like you said, you know, you want to walk away feeling good, like, yeah, that you did something hard, but you don't want to necessarily think, oh, I don't want to ever do that again because it kicked my tail. It's so bad. Right. And if you can find ways to hedge against that,
right.
It's appropriate.
Well, the other thing too, I mean, you have children, I have children. You know, if I can't go out in the backyard and throw passes and run drills with them later in the day, what's the purpose of having fitness? Right. I mean, in my mind's eye, it's what we call kind of wellness capacity. You know, wellness is always, people define it as a state in a sense of being fit or being well. I define it, you know, as an actionable, being able to do. And so that wellness capacity to be able to say, hey, listen, I can do, you know, if Scott calls me up and says, hey, my wife's got this crazy project for me to do, can you come help me? I can say yes, right? I have the ability, I have the capacity to be able to say yes. And I think we underestimate the, you know, what that does for the mindset, even for the hormonal response to being able to say yes to someone, I can help you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the community element is an important piece of that too, is being able to, you know, show up strong, being able to help somebody out and create that community with somebody. So at the RXR3 Recovery Lounge, Haymarket, Virginia, so you've got a couple different modalities. Maybe let's pick one or two and dig into those, like what it is in an abbreviated format, you know, what it is, what it does, and why I would do it.
For sure. I typically, you know, I don't want to take up too much time. I have a triplet, something I try to do weekly. I do like stacking the services because I do feel like one builds on top of the other and kind of assist or kind of maximizes the overall result of the other. But I usually start with pulse electromagnetic field. It's a PEMF. That's the abbreviation. We use pulse centers, PMF machine. We have two of them. We have an X1 and an XL Pro. And basically, if we think about when we are healing, and I'll just use that as a broad term, healing, even, after a workout, your body needs to heal. It needs to repair what you've broken down. But I mean, you have people that have strains, you have overuse injuries that need to be healed. I've had people come in that have infections on the skin that requires healing, and just kind of getting into the basis of it. How do we heal? Well, we need to increase, we heal from the cell's energy. I mean, you think is worst case, you have a malignant tumor, that cell is, that cancerous cell has a very low energy and within that cell. So we want to increase that energy. One of the best studies out there was from NASA. It was a 4-year, $10 million study. And what their goal was how long does it take for an individual to go from a low intracellular charge to back to what they would consider normal. And so intracellular charge is, the highly negative it is, the better. So if you break your bone, if there was a measurement of that, that would be probably at negative 50 millivolts. Average is about negative 25, and anything below negative 21 is sick. And so a cancer cell is positive 30 millivolts. And so what we're trying to do is increase that overall cellular charge through pulse electromagnetic field going through the body. In the early 70s, it was FDA approved for bone growth. We've got pictures in here showing from, a 9-day span from a broken radius. In 9 days, it's completely healed. And so what that happens, I mean, the body's naturally going to increase its charge, but it can only do that so much. And so we're going to artificially or synthetically bring that up so that we can increase the rate of healing. And we underestimate, it's not just healing. I mean, how much does our nervous system depend on overall cellular charge? And, obviously in today's time, as we're speaking now, there's a lot of people that have high anxiety and high stress, high cortisol levels. That challenges the system. I mean, the body's continually in a fight or flight, high cortisol, high adrenal gland state. And so how do we calm that down? Well, we calm that down by giving the body energy so that it feels like it's safe. It's not in a fight or flight state. So I usually start off with that. And then I usually spend 45 minutes. I mean, the goal is 3 hours of PMF a week. The study I spoke earlier, NASA, they concluded at 51 hours, that's how long it would take to get somebody from a sick, or after obviously you come off the space shuttle, sometimes they have to carry those guys off the shuttle. But, at 51 hours, your body's going to be at a state to where you're going to be what they would consider healthy and vibrant. I follow that with, we have sensory deprivation tanks. That's kind of a harsh term. We like to call them float tanks. What that is, it's a tank that has anywhere between 11 to 12 inches of water. That water is conditioned to your skin temperature. So it's going to be the same. It's about 92 to 93 degrees. And so your brain no longer has to heat or thermoregulate. It's dark. You can turn on lights if you want. And the cool thing of it is it's got like 1,200 to 1,500 pounds of Epsom salt. So it's dense in the Dead Sea. So it's pushing your body to the top, and you can, effortlessly float. Why is that important? I mean, we're always under tension. Gravity is always pulling us down. And then when we go out and run, we go out and lift, our body is compressing. And so we want to decompress. And, think about what that means to decompress. Someone says, hey, I've had a rough day, I need to decompress. Well, in their mind's eye, they just kind of want to chill out. And then you can think of it physiological way. We want to decompress. You think about decompressing the spine. That allows, your whole electrical system to work better. So we started off with PMF, charging the electrical system. and then we decompress and kind of take some of the, some of that tension that we have from day to day. So I spend 60 to 90 minutes. Usually I pop right out of there at 75 minutes. Studies have shown 90 minutes in tank, like 3 to 4 hours of REM sleep. So obviously, as you know, you probably talked with some folks on the podcast that sleep is really the key for recovery.
Yep.
So that kind of helps my circadian rhythms kind of even out. I come out of there and then I go into our light stem, our red light therapy bed for 40 minutes. And that has a number of upside benefits. The key thing that I'm doing that for is an increase in nitric oxide. Obviously my body's relaxed. Increasing nitric oxide in the body allows what we're doing there is a vasodilation. So we get more blood flow. But even, you're increasing collagen as well, just from the stress of the red light. And basically what that has is 5 different wavelengths of red light. One of the key light waves is the deep red and the infrared. That's getting deepest into the derma, and the deeper you get into the derma, the greater the increase of not only nitric oxide but also the production of collagen. And when I say collagen, people always think of the skin. I think of the white. I'm thinking of the joints and the tendons. That needs an increase of collagen, to recover from the stress. And I finished in April. I did my first 50 miler, and the red light bed was a very, if I didn't have any time, if I only had 20 minutes, I would definitely get 20 minutes into the red light bed and feel as though I can go, accomplish the things that I need to do throughout the day.
Yeah. That's it's interesting because especially with the nitric oxide discussion, and how that helps. And do you ever integrate any kind of like breathing methodology while doing the red bed as well?
The great question. So probably in the past 3 weeks, I have not done it in the red bed, although I have, you encouraged me last year with the nasal breathing. So I have tried to do that, but my breathing, I typically do the breathing in the float tank. It's, as you know, when you start to see, the kind of the lights and the swirls, when you start to do the breath holds. So I do probably box breathing. I start off with box breathing, then I'll do a light nasal breathing, deep in, exhale, and then I'll do some breath holds while I'm in there. And it just takes you into a little bit of a deeper state of meditation while you're in the tank.
Yeah. Well, I can speak for the float tank. I've done that a couple of times and need to do it more consistently, but that experience was definitely unique where you're floating, even though it's 12 inches of water. But it felt like a bit of a chiropractic experience too. As I'm laying in the water, you can hear your bones and joints kind of popping and releasing from that weightlessness sensation for that recovery element.
Yeah, for sure. I've got a couple of chiropractors that'll recommend their patients. I mean, with chiropractors, I mean, they have a tough job, and if your body's not wanting to give up and get that adjustment, it's a tough job, and sometimes can be painful for the patient. So they'll recommend their patients coming in and doing a float before an adjustment. And I've had people just say, man, it's just like butter. They just go right through it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense if it's kind of releasing that pressure, and that's a lot of the issue when it comes to chiropractic is the mobility of the individual and being able to effectively get them through. And so if they're tight in a particular area, you don't want to just coldly, like anything else, so you want to warm up before you work out. Similarly, it seems like that would make sense to kind of release the body a little bit of the stress to make the pliability more effective.
Absolutely.
So, you also have a couple other services in there. I know there's the cryo tank. That's one I think that I know for me was uh, a mental push through. So maybe when you start talking about how cold that is and just anyway, I feel like, Han Solo in Star Wars. But anyway, maybe explain that and the benefits.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I tell all my folks, I mean, if we have customers come in, 6 to 7 of them will be females. I mean, we have more females that do the cryotherapy than males, and they, they seem to be a hair bit tougher. I've had males, get in there and they're like 5 seconds in and say, "Let me out." A couple of things. I think, I always talk about adaptation. I think everything in here and everything we do in life causes us to adapt. Either we're not going to do it anymore, or we're going to adapt and grow. So getting uncomfortable, whether that's a new job, a new place to live, a new circumstance in life, adaptation. Is that easy? No. And so I think just a small inoculation of training, on the nervous system, but even physically, psychologically, hey, this is hard. This too will pass. It will end. And then before you know it, 3 minutes is up and you're out. So I think that we've had a lot of parents bring their children in here that have high anxiety and just going through the cryotherapy, them going into something they feel like they can't do, and then they accomplish it. It does a lot for their mental state and just allows you kind of to grow from that and then just kind of accomplish and overcome some of the challenges that they have in life. And that's kind of the first part. The second part is, it's all about inflammation. And I think, immune system is on everybody's radar. And, when you think about the immune system, one of the biggest challenges is inflammation. And so we need a certain amount of inflammation, but typically most Americans have too much inflammation. So knocking that down a little bit, there's if someone measures their C-reactive proteins, if they're over a certain level, they have too much inflammation in the body. So being able to knock that down so that people can move. So the cold actually, naturally does that, but it doesn't do it like you would think it. It doesn't do it like, hey, I'm gonna sit in an ice bath for 20 minutes. You typically are having a reduction of tissue size. You're not getting that in 3 minutes, but what you are getting is the signaling from the brain or from the skin. You have thermoreceptors in the skin that sends a signal to the brain and says, hey, listen, we've had a 10-degree drop, a 15-degree drop, a 20-degree drop of skin temperature. We need to make some changes here. This is not good for, if we continue to get this cold, we're going to die. So 80% of the body's fluids come to the core. So for obvious reasons, we can live without a hand, but we can't live without a heart. So just around that area to keep, that core temperature at a certain level. The cool thing about that is that circulation, you're getting an increase of oxygen, and we're getting, a vasodilation because we need to move this through very fast. And so, and then once you come out, that reoxygenated fluid and blood goes through the periphery, and that oxygen, obviously, its natural result when it's in its environment reduces inflammation. So a lot of people think the cold reduces the inflammation, but it's in a sense of just an increased oxygen flow throughout the body that's going to reduce that inflammation through. That's why a lot of people get out of there. It's not just so much that they feel numb, but they literally, they could come in there with back pain or knee pain. It's like, man, I don't feel anything now. And they think it's just because they just feel numb because it's, their body temperatures, got down to 48 to 50 degrees. But it's really since that blood flow coming back through, that reoxygenated blood, during the session. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a bit of a catalyst to help enable or create the innate ability for the body to respond to circumstances and do what it's designed to do. But so it's like just enough stress to enable that without kind of crushing it. It seems like.
Absolutely. It's what they call a hormetic stress. If I left a guy in there, he would kill him, but just to having that small inoculation is going to stimulate the body to have a positive effect.
Awesome. So, what else is at the recovery lounge that you guys are utilizing?
I mean, something as simple as just the sauna, the infrared sauna. I mean, there was probably one of the best studies out there is from Finland, and they followed a group of guys, 38. I don't know why it was just 38 years, but and you know, in Finland, everybody does some type of heat therapy, and so you had guys that were doing it 2 to 3 times a week, and you had guys that were doing it 4 to 5 times a week. And the guys that were doing it 4 to 5 times a week, you know, had 40%. They lived 40% longer than the guys that only did it 2 to 3 times. So, you know, you have a detoxing. We did that with our LO2 system, which is our oxygen contrast, where we're contrasting 85% oxygen with 14% oxygen. You know, here in Virginia, we're, you know, percent of air molecule, oxygen molecules in the air is 21%. And so in Aspen, Colorado, you're about 14%. And then we 4 times that. So once we desaturate the body, we use pulse oximeters to kind of measure, you know, where the body's oxygen is in the periphery. And so once we desaturate, then we resaturate at 85%. So we're there again, challenging the body. You know, the goal is to create a hunger for the body's oxygen and then perfuse it with oxygen. So you can only, as you know, I mean, you had, I think with Peter McCowan on a while back, you can only put so much oxygen in the red blood cell. So the goal here is to put it deep into the plasma. And so the goal is to oxygen into the plasma so that the body can mitigate inflammation, but also increase the capacity, you know, to have more oxygen when you're at your, you know, peak performance.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like a positive interest rate multiplier, force multiplier.
For sure.
So, Tim, you know, we're kind of coming up on time. Grateful for it, for your expertise in this, and you know, personally for inspiring me to a degree on starting this podcast and the services you guys have. What I like to do is close things out with a few personal questions. So,
Sure.
What are you reading right now?
The Wedge. Well, I got a couple of books. I am not necessarily rethinking, just learning things on farming. So I'm reading Gabe's Brown Dirt to Soil. I have a little mini farm. We raise pigs and chickens, and I want to get into doing cows. So we're looking at more acreage and just it's 5 tenets of farming. One of is no till, but just, you know, kind of I want to be a hair bit more sustainable, but also understanding, you know, a former or an older way for agriculture. So I've got a couple of books that I'm reading on that, but probably my favorite book right now is The Wedge. Marcus Aurelius Meditations. That's the 3 books that I'm reading right now. But I think The Wedge is something that's really neat. He was the guy that did Wim Hof's, a couple of years back, Scott Carney, Wim Hof, What Doesn't Kill You. But he's got a new book out now called The Wedge. I like it.
Cool. What are you listening to right now, music or podcast?
You know what? After I did the 50, I'm not running as much as I used to. So I have not been listening, you know, when I run. So I'm running probably maybe 20 miles a week. I've been listening to the birds. And I miss it because I feel like there's a lot out there. I mean, I'm trying to keep up with your podcast, and I do like Jocko Willink's podcast, just on leadership. So I guess when I do listen, I focus on leadership, anything to help me be a better leader.
Okay. And last one, and we probably touched on all of them, but what is your go-to rest and recovery method?
That's a tough one. Are you thinking about service, or are you just thinking about
for you, what's maybe your favorite
supplement?
one?
Yeah, my favorite one. You know, here recently it's been the red bed. We're doing some research now just to kind of everybody feels it, but nobody has an understanding of why it happens. It's that post-workout flu or that blah, and you just feel like you just can't, you can just barely put two sentences together. What has really helped me, I've tried to do red bed within 2 hours post-workout, and it takes it all away. I mean, just the sense of where, the heaviness, the buildup of lactic acid it gets me in the arms and the chest and the back and the legs. You just feel heavy. So 40 minutes of the red bed within 2 to 3 hours after a workout has been magic.
Cool. Yeah, I could definitely relate to the post-workout, like after running any extended period of time, that the brain leaves the building, it seems like at times, and I can't formulate sentences, or you ask me anything in depth and I'm like, come back to me later.
Exactly. And for me, I can't afford to have that 2 to 3 hour lower time. I would just lay down. I got perfect at a 21-minute nap. So instead of just doing a nap on the floor, I just do a 40-minute in the red bed, or sometimes just a 20-minute in the red bed, and it just flips the switch.
Awesome. Well, again, Tim, grateful for the time, and appreciate you. Thanks.
Hey, brother, I appreciate you, man. Keep hammering. Your consistency on the podcast is inspiring. So I commend you on that. Not an easy thing to do.
I appreciate it. All right, sir.
All right, brother.